I really believe no matter how motivated people are, if the job itself has not been designed well, or the organization has not been designed well, it will impede performance. So as an individual, I can be motivated, but the design itself can impede performance. So if you're in South Africa, you will know that there is a president of one of our parties who said, "These MacG wannabes." So I'm back. I'm another MacG wannabe. Another MacG wannabe on the loose. Guys, welcome to another episode of Organizational Behavior with Siphiwe Moyo. And it's such a great honor for me today because I keep repeating my name because I'm building a brand, baby. Do you remember that was an advert?
Yes,
Building
yes.
a brand, baby. Building a brand. So in this podcast, we really love discussing academically sound principles in organizational behavior, but we want to do it in a fun way. I'm really allergic to boring, but we also don't want to waste people's data because data is expensive in South Africa. So we try and get the balance right. But the premise of the podcast, as you know, is that work doesn't have to suck. I don't know where people get this idea that work is this thing you tolerate until you have fun in the weekend. And so in today's episode, hopefully we're going to change your mind about that. We dive deep into a topic called job and organizational design. Don't switch off. I promise it's going to be exciting. We'll explore how leadership, HR, and employees can play a pivotal role in creating workplaces where people thrive and reach their potential. So if you're tired of the same old soul-crushing routine, stick around because we're about to drop some knowledge bombs that might revolutionize your approach to work. I hope. I really hope. I wish.
Pressure.
Guys, you know our last episode was amazing. So,
Oh, wow. Tshepo, wow.
So now let's introduce our fantastic guests for tonight. Joining us are two experts in organizational development, design, and HR. People that I love so much that I just want to hang out with. I told you that this show is an excuse for me to catch up with the people I love. So we have Bongi Dlamini and Tshepo Tsiu. Bongi is the Head of Organizational Development, Design and Business Transformation. She's passionate about creating workplaces where employees are not just cogs in the machine, but are empowered to be their best selves. One of the best facilitators I've ever experienced, in my view. We once were in a session together. Do you remember?
I do.
Where?
I do. I do. We were at what's this fancy Nyana hotel somewhere in, was it Fairways? And
Fairways.
yes, we're doing it with one of our public sector groups.
Yes.
Yes, I definitely, I can't forget.
You are amazing.
I was with the infamous Siphiwe Moyo.
And then we also have Tshepo Tsiu. Tshepo is an industrial psychologist registered with the Health Professional Council of South Africa. For those of our international audience, you must always assume you have an international audience and explain these things. He's also a management consultant, managing director of Affinity Management Consulting, and he has really helped numerous organizations transform their organizational structures and cultures to unlock this employee potential. He's an amazing former colleague at the bank that shall remain nameless, but also somebody I've been trying to be friends with beyond the workplace. You know, I've been trying to be friends with you, and you don't want to chill with me.
How?
Those were COVID things.
Oh, is it?
I was isolating.
Okay.
I love the excuses. So welcome, Bongi and Tshepo. It's really great to have you. So we're going to talk about the world of job design, organizational design, and whether those can be able to unlock employee potential. Let's start with you, Bongi. Every time I look at your socials, you're traveling. What's with you and traveling?
Travel is my happy place. It's my thing. I think we all have a thing. And for me, it's travel.
Where do you get the money?
Guys, I get you buy expensive cars. You buy more whiskey over the weekend. I buy plane tickets. So that's just the difference. Okay. So yeah, I mean, really, and I'm being real about that. Because it's my thing, I sometimes have to make certain sacrifices and scale down other things to make sure I can have that experience, because it really is, for me, my happy place. I love, experiencing new places. spaces, seeing new architecture, how people live. And so I'm intentional around trying to find ways to make it.
No.
I will drive that car for 10 years if it means
you
I
have
can
to.
get a couple of plane tickets.
Yeah. No, you're flourishing, Shem. You are. So before we dive into this idea of job and organizational design, could you please share your background? Where are you from and how did you get to be so incredible? Don't worry, I said that, you didn't, so no one can accuse you of pride and so on.
First, I just want to say thanks for the invite. I mean, when Mr. Moyo calls you and says, come and participate, I didn't even look at the topic. I was like, I'm going to be there. I first said, let me just check. But in my mind, I was like, whatever's in the diary, I'm going to make sure. I mean, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity with a nominated motivational. Yeah, anyway, so I'm from KZN, so I'm a Zulu girl.
Really?
Yeah, so that's my
So the
hometown.
Dlamini is the Sibalkulu.
No, it's the Nkosi. So, but
Nkosi one,
yeah,
okay.
so my mother is a Zulu woman, so I grew up there most of my life. But I definitely, I mean, you know, a Swazi girl also through and through. Yeah, so how I got into this field, it's actually quite interesting. So my first job was in sales.
Okay.
And part of the sales job that I did was being on a personal kind of development program. And, you know, and this is ages ago. I'm not going to say how long because it would be giving away my age.
Yeah.
But part of that journey, we did, you know, sort of leadership courses, things around personal mastery, etc. And I was just so fascinated about the work that the facilitators and the people who sort of put that program together. And I thought, wow, this is nice work. And then I showed up well in the sessions. Long story short, post that sort of year journey, a job sort of appeared in their space. And I took a chance and I applied with zero experience.
Wow.
And mind you, at that time, I was a top sales consultant. So that was like weird for people to say, but you're doing so well in sales. Why do you want to move out into sort of an HR related field? But it connected with me. I felt that type of work was more around my purpose. And, you know, I tried and I got in and I, like they say, the rest is history. So for, the largest part of my life, I've been particularly in org development, recently adding design to it because I think there's a great marriage between those two things and really just the broader human capital world.
Sounds amazing. Looking forward to our conversation. Tshepo, do you recall the first time we met?
Eta.
Etada, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much again for the invite. Actually, also blessed that I happen to be available.
Yes.
Because, I don't know, something with September, everybody wants to get married. So the past few weekends have been weddings.
Yes.
And also so busy. So actually, I could have been on my couch. But thank you very much for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
We met. I remember you joined the organization that I used to work at. You were new. I was showing you around to the water cooler.
Yes.
And the coffee.
Were you
machines.
impressed by this guy? Did you think I was hot?
Yeah, look, I think you were very senior. But you didn't stay. I was looking forward to really working together, but you didn't stay long. But the relationship continued. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and I've been following the work that you do. And there was one of my clients. They said they wanted a speaker, and I said, "Here's the guy."
Yes.
And the feedback I had, even the CEOs. There was a couple of CEOs there. They were impressed.
Thank you very much. Oh, we didn't pay Tshepo to say that. Welcome, Melty. Just before we delve into our topic, you've had a remarkable career in HR and as an industrial psychologist. Really, really love your work. Probably the only industrial psychologist who also DJs for fun. This one,
wow.
Yeah, he doesn't do. This is just for fun, eh? Or do you take gigs?
No, it's for fun.
Yeah.
It's really for fun.
Yeah, you know someone has enough.
Is that
money.
your happy place?
It's my happy place. I've tried golf.
Yeah.
I've tried other things, but I don't enjoy them. I just love music. I love playing. It's really nice.
Very
it's
cool.
a good energy. So just going back to career, I think I've just been blessed to have good mentors in my life, on my path. I started off working for an industrial psychologist. So from the get-go, I started working for the guy. He lived in Douglasdale. He had a BMW.
Oh,
I was a boy from Diepkloof.
40K.
And I saw nice house, pool, BMW 5 Series. And I said, that's what I want. And it's amazing. My dad used to say, the life you want is the life you'll get. And I live in 4 ways, pool and whatever. I don't drive a BMW, but,
Yeah.
so
Thank goodness.
he was a good role model.
Sorry, can we just correct someone who has problems with BMWs?
So from that, I started working he was subcontracted to a big consulting firm.
Okay.
And he brought me along, and that consulting firm said, we want your boy.
Okay.
And through that, I got exposed to big projects. Transnet, City of Joburg, Spoornet, when a lot of the changes were happening. And the biggest thing I learned from that is project management. It is a skill I learned because regardless of whatever project, I'm a good project manager. So that's why even when I went into corporate, without blowing my own horn, I think I got things done because I'm a good project manager. I could scope and plan things and get things done. So recently, especially with post-COVID, I've branched out into other industries. I'm into insurance now and other industries, and even construction. But the main thing is project management.
Sounds good. We'll delve into that a little bit later. When I think about organizational design and job design, particularly as we frame it, that these can be used to unleash employee potential. Maybe there's someone tuning in here thinking, that sounds very HRE, it sounds very OD. Should leaders and employees care about this topic, or should they just switch off right now? Boom.
So I think leaders absolutely need to care, because if you think about job design and organizational design and the role of what a leader needs to do. So, your job is to achieve the business goals and the strategy and give results to your stakeholders. So how else do you do that? By making use of, the resources you have optimally. And people is a key part of that. And also how you organize all of that, if we come back to design, is very important. And I mean, we can talk a little bit more about it, but part of what is the success in how these things land and work is whether the leaders are invested and understand and bring in the actual business knowledge into these spaces. If it's just an HR thing, the impact is not the same. So definitely for me, leaders definitely need to be involved. It's part of your role. It's part of what will help you to drive the success that you need to do in leading that business. And also from an employee perspective. So, I mean, we're in a world where more and more you need to take interest and accountability in the work you do, in contributing to the type of environment you want. And so, having the courage to give input, to ask questions, to be involved in processes like this is absolutely important. So I think we've moved past the times where it's just an HR field. But all kind of key stakeholders, be it the line manager, the employee, definitely need to be involved in it if you particularly want to see the type of impact that you're looking for.
Okay, sounds great. The premise of the podcast, Tshepo, is that work doesn't have to suck. Do you genuinely believe that work doesn't have to suck? Or what do you believe maybe it's the state of the global workplace? I always say that I kind of feel like people are enjoying work and just getting through this thing called work so that they can then have fun somewhere else.
Yeah.
What do you think is the state of the global workplace at the moment?
Yeah, I think work should generally be a vocation. Like vocation is a calling. But we have a history in our country and job reservation. So people were excluded from industries and people had to do what was there. So you were forced to in the mines, or you'd either be a teacher or a nurse. So people were forced. You didn't have Moyo doing these sort of things. So I can sort of understand why that could be happening. But things have changed. We can't harp on that before. But work should really be a vocation, and you are providing a service to society. I think that's the way it should be, and I think that's where most of your potential can be unleashed. Remember, you spend most of your time, conscious time, at work. You spend more time at work than with your family. So it should be where you find expression and meaning and so on. So yeah, I don't think it should be a schlep.
But it shouldn't, but is it, Bong?
So for me, I'm going to say contradictory things, right? So the first thing is I definitely think that you should find ways to make work meaningful for you. And as either leaders and employees, we need to try and create environments that, make work fun for people so that they can thrive. Because, there's lots of research that shows that actually will help you with performance and the output that you need. But at the same time, I also do think that it's important to have a bit of a reality check around that work can suck sometimes, because if you don't have that as part of your reality check, you might have very unrealistic expectations about work and then be extremely miserable. So maybe it's an 80-20 kind of principle, but I do think that sometimes you have great days and you are in a role you like and your boss is great, and then you go through a value where work might suck a bit and it's not so great, and those are natural sort of phases of life. So I think that's how I kind of look at it. I think Oprah has, excuse the whatever we call it, the cliche. Yeah, but she has a clip where she talks about that, sometimes your job can suck, but still show up and go to it and see what are the lessons that you can learn from it when you are in that value. Hone in your skill, because those are the things that will, help you. And then she also says that remember that the job is not who you are. It's just something that you do. It's a part of your life, but definitely let it align to your purpose, your passion, your vocation. But definitely have other things in your life that fill you up. Because if you're thinking work is the only thing, that's when sometimes I think we set ourselves up for a little bit of failure.
All right, cool. So let's delve into this. So, I'll tell you a bit of a story. I'm often called to come and motivate people, right? And that's a good thing. That's my bag, as young people say. But I really believe no matter how motivated people are, if the job itself has not been designed well, or the organization has not been designed well, it will impede performance. So as an individual, I can be motivated, but the design itself can impede performance. Do you agree with that, firstly, Tshepo? And have you seen some really bad designs that no matter how much people try, they just can't work with that design?
Yes. Poor design results in a lot of problems. Fragmentations and silos. I told you I'm in the insurance industry also. I've submitted a claim. It's been 2 weeks now.
Sure.
And what I'm seeing is emails going from person to person. And the org design specialist in me says, you know what, I think I should come and consult with you and redraw, because you've got fragmentation, you've got silos, and poor communication. At the end of the day, the customer suffers. So it's a big problem in organizations, and the company always suffers. Clients and even financially, you find you can't compete. Remember, it's a competitive space. If you don't structure yourself well, you can't win. So I actually like some of Sia Kolisi's press conferences when he talks, and I think even corporates can learn from.
What does he say?
Talks about leadership, teamwork, structure, knowing your position, but also filling up for other people when they're poor. And whether it's sport field or not, we can learn a lot from how the Sprungs do. And I've just shown an example. It's been 2 weeks, a claim. And it's a funeral claim. so you can understand.
There's another commentator in football called Junior Kanye, one of my favorite commentators because he's always bashing Kaizer Chiefs. He always also talks about, you can see when a team lacks philosophy and structure. It seems like this structure thing is very important. Bongi, do you want to comment on those bad designs and how bad design can impede performance?
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely agree with a lot of what Tshepo said. And I think what's also important to add to that is if you also, though, then don't have kind of the supporting things around it, you can have the best design and still it can impede performance. So culture is very important around it. How you've thought around capabilities and building around it. You know, I'm coming back to your example of the funeral process. I'm also wondering what their process looks like. And, you know, what are some of the things that they've done to just ensure that value chain, you know, as part of, yes, the design. But I think for me, those are also critical elements to it. Just giving examples, sometimes on paper, the design or the role can look brilliant. But then in execution and sort of operationalization, something falls apart. And 9 out of 10, it's because these other elements haven't been carefully thought through. And this is for me where I also bring in my sort of development hat into it, that if you also don't get people to sit down and have a conversation around how they see this design that we've put together, that we've unpacked, really play out, you also have challenges. And then what happens in typical organizations that I've been, then people think the design is wrong or the role needs redone. And no, it doesn't. It actually just needs the stakeholders to sit down and actually unpack and be aligned on what they're reading, what they've created, and how that is playing out in real life.
So cool. So we've been chatting. Maybe there's someone tuning in and saying, what is this design thing anyway? So maybe let's have a bit of definitions. We'll define organizational design and then we'll define job design. Tshepo, maybe you can give us, what is organizational design?
Yeah. Every organization has a strategy. There's something that they want to do or achieve. And org design is simply how they're structured to achieve that. That's the simplest definition.
So cool. I think I had a quote. Structure follows strategy. So there must be strategy first.
Correct.
Yeah.
You must know what you're trying to do and then you design for
Correct.
it.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now we know org design. Guys, you must listen to this podcast. You're going to get new vocabulary. Now, when you're sitting in a family meeting, you must drop about job design. This family has not been designed properly. What is job design?
I think Tshepo's really articulated well. Another element that I'd like to add to it is a good thing that goes along with design is the operating model, because that's also around looking at how the design comes alive and all the pieces fit together. And those are two concepts that I think is important to think about when you talk org design, also job design, but also think about what is this operating model, which will encompass, those elements like that I spoke about earlier, whether it's the culture and the capabilities and the talent process and other things that will come together to make it operate, almost
That's so
more
cool.
effectively.
So let's say I'm an entrepreneur. I've just started my business.
Yeah.
Before we go to job design. So when you talk about the operating model, I'm starting a business. I have a strategy, and Tshepo has told me that I need to be very careful about how I design the jobs that people. But you are adding something else called the operating model. What is that? And in my example of being an entrepreneur, what should I be thinking about in order to set people up for success?
Yeah. So if we say, okay, fine, you're an entrepreneur, you've got a strategy, there's something that you want to achieve. You need to start unpacking, so what does that look like? What is it that you want to do? What are some of the processes that are part of it? What are some of the key capabilities? And capabilities is, let's use you, for example,
Sure.
I guess speaking and facilitation, those are some of the key capabilities that are core part of your business.
Okay.
So you need to think about all of that. Is there technology that goes along with it? And then you've got to literally think about, yes, you can have different roles. Maybe you're going to decide, I might need like a PA or whatever. But also spend some time to think around, so how do those things now come together? How are you going to operate? What's kind of a formula or a pathway to almost simplify it that you're going to choose, so that you don't just sort of design jobs in isolation, but they're not aligned to sort of process flows that you've thought about, speaking to what you want to specifically focus on as a capability. So it's really around looking at those different buckets that's going to help you achieve your strategy and goals, and thinking around, so how is this thing, and for me, an operating model, the simplest way, how is these things going to work? You do have to give thought to how is all of this going to work, including the jobs, the org structure that you might create. But remember, these things operate, alongside processes and other things that you need to consciously think about and plan.
Sounds amazing. I heard that if you're designing a job, in order to unleash employee potential in a job, you must make sure that there are certain things like jobs that give people skills variety. The more variety I have in my job, the better I'll be motivated. I guess something else called task significance. If I believe that the job that I'm doing is significant, I'll do better. Maybe, can you tell us, maybe Bongi and then Tshepo will go, if there are any, maybe, job design models, frameworks, or anything along those lines that can help maybe leaders think about whether the way jobs are set up are not setting people up for failure. Maybe that can assist us.
So definitely, I think the things that you've added now are important. So for me, maybe a kicking off start is to say, we are in a changing world of work. And so, maybe you started your business ages ago and you really haven't taken the time to pause and think about the jobs and reevaluate them and change them. So I think first for me, a sort of a point of call is just to think about, are you reviewing your jobs according to your changing landscape and the changing times so that it can become more meaningful and more relevant? So that's number one. And then definitely there are many, different ways of looking at doing that. I think just coming back to the change, I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day who's a real specialist, not people like me. And I said, is there like a benchmark around how often you need to do that? And they were saying there's not much research that says it, but a good way to think about it is you are in changing times when your business evolves and when leaders want to do changes. That's a good time to also then look at the jobs and, kind of review them. But typical things, if you read and look out there, we often talk about how you can enrich a job by adding, new and different tasks. If you think about technology now, even trying to simplify it so that people aren't stuck in jobs doing laborious things when you could improve the job by automating something, added responsibility. So rotation. So there's a lot of little strategies that people can think about that really can add to it. But I think for me, what's important, and maybe this is speaking from an employee perspective, because often as employees, we might sit back and, I'm waiting for my manager to make my job better, and not taking away that definitely leaders have a role to play in looking at jobs and ensuring that they're meaningful for employees. But I suppose if you're an employee, also think about, and some of us might have heard this term about job crafting.
Yes.
So put up your hand and you think, and, and speak to your leaders around ways in which you can influence your own job to make it better. I had a good example the other day where one of my team members was talking about a process that's going to happen, and she was asking me if we are involved in it. And I said to her, no, we're not. And then she says, well, I think we really could add value to that process. And then I said to her, yeah, I think we can, but my plate is so full right now, I don't even want to knock on that door because I know what's happening. And then I sort of left it, and then 2 minutes later, I actually said to her, you know what? Because you can see it, why don't you set up some time for us to think about it and unpack it? And that could be maybe something you do, because she has also been looking for wanting to do more. So for me, that's a good example of somebody who's, opening their eyes in the business and saying, hey, but from the role I have in this thing, I think I could play a role. It's not crafted in her job profile, but she's definitely right that there's contribution she can make. And from an employee perspective, that's a way of sort of enriching. And I really think because she's thinking about it, if it pulls through, it will give her meaning and purpose.
You've given us some really good gems to think about. Things like job enrichment, job enlargements, job crafting. Those are the things that we can really use as leaders to make sure, particularly in these times where we don't have too many vertical promotions. If we can't promote somebody, but we can use things like enlargement, enrichment to give a bit of variety to people, because if work is meaningless and repetitive, then I'm bored. But I think those ideas are really, really cool. Tshepo, in terms of job design, what are some of the thinkings, models, frameworks that maybe organizations can adopt to just shape their structures and cultures for optimal performance?
Yeah. It is an itinerant process. It happens all the time. It's a way of life. When you talk about how regular or what is the timetable to do this, it is itinerant. I'm working on a project now with a client in Roskilde.
It's
itinerant. It happens all the time.
I learned something now.
You can't have a timetable. So, for instance, this project is a government project. So they've got a service provider for this and a service provider for this. I'm supposed to do this. There'll be a third leg. But I'm busy with the second leg. The board had approved the structure. We're busy with job descriptions now. It's 361 job descriptions to be reviewed. Some are new, but many of them are the same.
Sure.
The guy tells me, says, there's been changes in legal and risk. So we no longer have risk officers. We've got risk practitioners. The board signed off on risk officers, not risk practitioners. So I like, hey man, where were you when these things were done? Because now my scope is job descriptions. I'm not here to redesign. And if this board is signed off on the org design, who am I to create a risk practitioner? So my point I'm trying to make is that it is an itinerant process because some of it is influenced by external. Like, for instance, changes in the risk and legal space affect you. So you might have signed off something in 2022, 2023, we're not having that. So it should be a norm. And people should get, remember, it's a highly competitive space, especially in the private sector. You sort of have to do that all the time. There was a joke we used to have. So one of my neighbors used to work for a bank.
Okay.
And then we were having a Saturday afternoon chat.
The ones I'm never invited to.
COVID, remember, it's still COVID apparently.
You know, if you play around fours, I don't know, you have a higher probability. But you invite me to Kempton Park. That alone makes our chances of meeting 10%.
Oh, wow.
Now, if you say I'm in the Infant Square area or Monte Casino, no, the chances is now 90%. So, factor in driving. So, what was happening there is that she's making a joke. She says she used to report to these ladies. They were older than her. And they didn't treat her well. Everything should be blamed. Even when she was on leave, should be blamed for stuff. So the organization split. So she went to the other area, and then they remained here. And through org design and redesign and changes, they came back again. But when they came back, she's now their boss. And then they were saying to her now, because she's the new, she says, you know what? We always saw potential in you. So org design is a way of life, but be careful how you treat people in organizations because how fluid these things are.
I think.
Yeah, sure.
So I think one thing I wanted just to add when you're talking about this change. So some of the things that I think, and it is a little bit of a paradox because, as Tshepo was saying, life changes and sometimes you do have to pivot. And it could be external factors, regulation that impacts, what your design looks like. And to respond and to be able to execute properly, you would have to, relook at it. And if you're going to dig your heels in, it could have a negative impact on you. But on the same breath, there's some organizations who are perpetually redesigning and they never give time for anything to settle and then get some lessons and then reevaluate. So it's almost as a leader, it is around balancing that life is about change. When do you need to pivot? Because there's times, but also when you've done something and put some stake in the ground, give it some time for you to see how it plays out before you change it. You don't want to be that organization where they say, lapaya, every year they're restructuring and reorganizing because it really creates a lot of anxiety for people. people then don't really have enough space and time to work and produce real results, because every time we're starting afresh, you're getting used to new people, and it becomes like a vicious cycle wheel. So I think for me, what's important for HR people and also for leaders is to just manage that balance and to sometimes think about, is org design number one the right solution? So that's also another thing that's important, because some people just always think if something happens, it's a design problem or it's a role problem. So that also, really just being sure around, is it time to change it? Do we need to give more time for this thing to settle, to learn some lessons and then pivot? Or yes, we need to change because the world of work has changed and contextual things, are playing out.
I think if I can just add that there's a certain trauma that creates consistent redesign. Remember, people spend a lot of time at work together, even more than they do with their partners, and consistent and unending changes. Some people are let go because they don't fit into the new plans. So you're literally splitting bonds that people make, and it's not nice. Sometimes people that you've been with, they tell you, we don't need you anymore, you've been retrenched. Even for the remaining people, it creates trauma. And sometimes as consultants, we walk into organizations. I remember, some told me, they might be watching, the lady, there's so much trauma. The lady was saying, Tshepo, wow, also.
Sure.
So it change people and consultants, even HR, need to also realize the effect it has on people. If you're gonna do this, you do it properly and not all the time and from there. And there's a serious change management that needs to happen. Yeah.
That's such a powerful point, because I think there are so many instances where when we get a new leader, we get a new design. Maybe there's a hierarchical structure, then there's metric structure, then network structure. Now you are reporting to someone else, and that trauma we don't speak about a lot. That people go through stuff when we design this. I want to move the conversations on how then can effective leadership, contribute to creating a workplace where employees feel motivated and engaged. The premise of us even having a conversations around design is mainly because we want to unleash employee potential. I'm always thinking about the fact that there are so many talented people in organizations that are not being fully utilized. And sometimes I feel like leaders don't even know how talented people actually are. So how can effective leadership then contribute to creating this workplace where people can really, really flourish?
I think for me, top of mind is leaders must involve the employees, right? So if you don't involve them in constructing work, in getting a sense, then you're not going to get to the points that you are saying. And often leaders forget that the people who actually know the job and the process better, those are the people who actually should be really part of those design conversations, because they're the ones who are involved in it, on a day-to-day basis, and can give you great insights that can then influence, however you then choose to organize. So I definitely think engaging and involving is a critical part, and listening. So listen to what they say, because, you have a certain viewpoint from where you might be, which is okay and it's understandable given by your nature as the leader. But just think about it like as a circle. To understand the whole, you need all the bits, but you're not going to see all the bits. So make sure that you're involving employees at those various levels to give you that insights, and then listen and use then that information to help to craft different things.
But surely they can't know that I don't know. I must be seen to be the one knowing everything, no?
Yes, and that's the problem. And that's also the shift as leaders that we need to make. Because I always say, as a leader, put yourself also in kind of a humanity perspective. How is it possible that you will know everything? I think about, organizations that I work with, right? Let's say the organization is 40,000 plus people with 2,000 or 3,000 plus different business units. You tell me, how is it possible if you're the CEO of the company, you'll know everything? It's humanly impossible. And so release yourself from that pressure as a leader. Release yourself. That's not your main goal to know everything. I'm not saying, of course, gather knowledge that helps you to lead better, but release yourself that you will know everything, because it is impossible. But what's important is how you lead to get then the perspective, how you invite people into conversations, how you put processes that get you to those outcomes. That's because, those are the things that, become the important part of it. So I definitely think, that that's an important part is leaders just listen to the people, invite them in, release yourself from thinking that you must know it all. You hired great people, hopefully, didn't you? So trust them. And just sort of listen.
That line is going to TikTok, where our producers, release yourself. That's a tip for TikTok, please.
I think just to add on, the leadership conversation is a very serious conversation. And as much as Bongi is saying, you've hired good people, organizations need to spend a bit more time with the leadership hiring perspective. The requirements are very, very high. And I would just start with just emotional intelligence and trustworthiness. And, this whole thing is being made and broken by leadership. And you need to invest a lot of time with the leaders. I fully agree that, there's a humanity and need to be open. People need to be able to disagree with you.
Yeah.
If people cannot disagree with you, then there's a big problem. And you as a leader need to be able to say, actually, you've got a point. We're no longer going to Sandton, we're going to Pretoria. You're right. And as long as you don't have that, you breed a culture where people just listen, just look at you, and then when the meeting ends, so the quality of leadership is very, very important.
Yeah. You just triggered something for me about leaders and like you're saying, the importance of spending time and building the leaders, because they're the ones that have influence on it. Another point for me when it comes to this, that often I've also seen that also leaders, if they have a member in their team, leaders hoard talent, and that's also dangerous, because then that means individuals don't have that opportunity to grow. So coming back to those ideas that we said, how can you enrich? So I've seen leaders where you say, okay, there's an opportunity for your good person to rotate and to go to another area to gain more experience and grow and develop. And of course, maybe that person in that area is doing good. And then what does the leader say? No, they can't go and because they want to hoard that person for their own space. Those things are then not helpful for helping people to have enriched careers.
But surely if my best person goes, then I can't deliver. So the leader is justified to do that.
Yeah, and it's true what you're saying, that you've got to understand that perspective. But this is also where then the emotional intelligence and having then a greater perspective as a leader that you've got to think about. Because if you then keep doing that, what might happen? Then the person will actually leave and go to another organization. So that's the danger, because you could do that. But then you've got to think about what might happen long term. And sometimes it isn't about you as the leader. And I mean, you have to sympathize with that leader, because I get it. Because they're thinking about, I have delivery, now you want my best person, etc. But it's also around thinking about this holistically, and also maybe then talking with the employee and negotiating and saying, okay, maybe give me 6 months or something, but have that kind of engagement rather than hoarding the talent, not allowing people to go and grow in different spaces. I mean, even now, work is changing. We know we're no longer just having matrix, hierarchical structures. There's matrix, there's dual reporting, and some leaders are not open to that. But those are ways in which we can enrich, people's job, give more exposure, but it definitely needs a level of maturity in that you're realizing, it's not about these are your resources, these are your people, but really just shifting your thinking around how you deal with these things.
Love that. Tshepo, your voice changed when you started speaking about leaders, it seems to me you are really concerned about the quality of leadership and the people we appoint to leadership. What do you think are the behaviors that we must look for then, including the emotional intelligence that we've spoken about? So obviously, we've worked for organizations where the person who gets promoted to be the leader was the person who's functionally and technically competent as an individual contributor. Are we investing enough when that person takes the transition to leadership? And what do you think we should be looking for in those people?
Before I even answer you, what tends to happen, I think what I'm seeing is that organizations are rewarding loyalty. So you've been with the company for a while and it's like you deserve to be elevated to a leadership, and even if you're not suitable. So I'm seeing some of that happening. And before I also answer your question, is that COVID has traumatized people. People lost family members, businesses suffered. So there's a financial and emotional trauma, and people need to be aware of that. And the requirements for a leader are even higher, even post-COVID, because you need to be able to contend with a workforce that is traumatized. But I'm also seeing, even in my own companies, that even the bonds have changed. For instance, we used to work together. We used to celebrate. We used to have what do you call this bachelor thing? If you're gonna have a baby, we'd have a
baby shower.
Yes, birthdays. Now, half the time we're at home. We forget birthdays. There's no birthdays anymore. So those are just small examples, but the bonds that people had have actually gone. So the requirements for a leader are massive. I think even much more than before. What was the question again?
The question was, what are these behaviors then we must look for in leadership? And also, how do we equip people as they make that transition from individual contributor to leadership in order to lead a little bit better?
That transition, you are now an agent. You are operating in the best interest of the organization. And that is a very, very important. Sometimes even it's not even about you. Sometimes you have to work even with people you may not particularly like.
Absolutely.
But it's in the best interest of the organization. And leaders, some people go into leadership roles and with a very selfish agenda. I think that could be one of the most important things. But emotional intelligence, support, those are very, very important. And unite people, unite differences. Don't take sides. Don't hear something in the corridor and then say, they're saying this about you. What do you have to say? Call the two people in. And then, guys, I don't like what's happening. This is what's happening. Let the other person respond. But you have leaders that divide people. So I will always bash on the table about this, that the requirements are just high, and take your time with putting people into leadership roles.
Love it. I want to move the conversation to some of the design elements around. Most people believe now that when you design, make people specialize, because specializing improves employee contribution, productivity. The more people specialize, the more efficient they become. I want to argue that specialization, although quite efficient, then becomes repetitive and it takes away the joy for me. Do we make people specialize or generalize?
So I think maybe for some certain fields there can be a space for that, but I don't think it should be the core. And why am I saying that? If we think about how work has evolved, our focus should be more around building core skills that can be transferable, so that it doesn't box people in just specific types of jobs. So maybe that can a little bit be contributed to a generous kind of view. But I think for me, how we look at jobs and how we look at the people who are qualified to do it has to fundamentally shift. I know we come from an era where, you will be the leader if you had coming back to your comment, the technical experience, etc. But rather, I think we need to be looking at the underlayer of, so what are those core skills? Because there's some skills that maybe I was in a particular area that I can actually transfer to another job and do that effectively without being, the core specialist in that. I like organizations where you hear that the current human capital executive was once the Moto GM, or now the human capital person is now going to lead that business. I love that because it really just opens up the possibilities of work. And what should enable that is the underbelly of the core capabilities and skills that are transferable. The other things you can learn. And coming back to the point where we're saying is, if you then can hold that, I don't have to be the technical specialist. I can get the right people who can help with that. Of course, I'm going to learn around it so that I'm able to lead it. But the core things that are important in this role is the leadership, is my ability to deal with change and complexity and to strategize and those things, because those are the things that will make you effective. So I think that's the kind of move that we need to be able to look at. And I think right now I'm giving an example of executives, but I think it plays out at all levels. And that's some of the things that leaders need to think about when they think around how do they enrich, employees' jobs. If you're going to look at it very linearly now, you're going to miss out on opportunities. But give people the chance to reskill, to upskill, to move laterally, because that's also ways in which their life and their roles can be. So I guess to answer your question is, I'm personally not saying off with specialization, but I am saying let's think differently around how we look at specialization, generalization, skills, capability, and how that translates to jobs.
Okay, we're gonna move towards the close. I was reading this book and I want your opinions on this one. So there's a book called Humanocracy, Redefining Jobs and Organizational Design. As opposed to bureaucracy, we can design jobs that I guess are human. That's why they call it humanocracy. And one of the things in that book, they say, how would you feel at work if? So tell me if this is an exaggeration. If you had the right to design your own job, if your team was free to set its own goals and define its own methods, you were encouraged to grow your skills and take on new challenges. Your workmates felt more like family than colleagues. You never felt encumbered by pointless rules and red tape. You felt trusted in every situation to use your best judgment. You were accountable to your colleagues rather than your boss. You didn't have to waste time sucking up or playing political games. You had the chance to help shape the strategy and direction of your organization. Your influence and compensation depended on your abilities, not your rank. You were never given reason to feel inferior to higher ups. How amazing would it be if all these things were true where you work? Are we getting closer to that? Does that sound like pie in the sky, or we can actually make this happen?
I think we can make definitely some of those elements happen. And I think some of it is already happening. So there are really great stories of people who work in great organizations out there, and I think sometimes we don't speak about that enough or acknowledge that enough. So when I was listening to what you're saying now, I could relate to some of that in spaces that I've worked in. I might not tick every single thing of the list that you said, but definitely there are elements that I can relate to. I mean, I'll give a simple example. So I've got a core job, but where I've worked, I've had opportunities to MC for big functions. Nothing to do with my job, but the space has allowed me to tap into that kind of a skill. I have learned how to write scripts. I had to write a script for something that we wanted to socialize, and I realized that it's not child's play writing a script. You can think it's easy. So I've refreshed appreciation for people who write plays and even short ads, because it's not child's play. But I had that experience at work to do a podcast so I guess what I'm saying is those possibilities are there. working in places where the structure is relatively flat. I can WhatsApp the CEO, I can come up with an idea that maybe is linked to my job or maybe even not. And somebody goes, yeah, that's good. If you think it's something to do, put something together and let's talk about it. So I definitely think there are possibilities and places and spaces where that can happen. I think what the call is that we just need to do more of that.
Sounds amazing. Tshepo?
I agree with Bongi. I think there might be some challenges with the first ones around we are able to set our own targets. Because at the end of the day, I still believe in a shareholder accountability. Shareholders want 12% or 20% on their investment. So targets are there. You can't just say, okay, no, 10 is fine or 5. You're accountable to a shareholders at the end of the day. But I agree with the rest of everything. I'm also a big believer that people need to take that responsibility. I think let's not make the organization, you just sit back and the organization must do and make me happy, make me know. Accountability is yours. The world has changed. I'm a big believer in multiple careers, that we have your core job, but be free to engage in other economic activities. And that's where you'll find fulfillment. But don't walk into organization and say, okay, let them please me. It's really a big ask.
It's really a big ask.
Yeah. What responsibility do you've got your own passion. It could be music, it could be cooking, it could be whatever, and you need to take that responsibility.
I'm loving it. So I'm going to pretend I have this huge team, and I want to check how far are we in the podcast, guys. Can I still go? About 5 minutes. We do have a team. We do. Okay. So I wanna nudge you with some really quick answers. I've prepared this really nice, so in like 7 minutes or so, quick answers, but to big questions. Let's see how it goes. Let's have fun. What do you say?
Go for it.
So, firstly, in terms of organizational design, there really is no need for formal hierarchy now. Yes or no? Why? Quickly. Whoever wants to go.
I think there needs to be order, direction, accountability.
There needs to be order, Bongi?
I'd say a little bit, but we definitely need to make things a lot more flatter.
More flatter. Second one, at the moment, the power is vested in positions. People lead with titles. That's why you get people who say, so-and-so said this, and because of the way we design. And you find that the CEO has never said this. Let's remove status-based titles and we'll have fun. What's your view?
Absolutely, and it's possible.
Correct.
But with a lot of culture work.
There's a lot of work that must be... Okay. Thirdly, we don't need authority to trickle down. We need individual accountability in design.
So in design, you've got to just make sure that you build in accountability at all the various different stages and make sure that people are clear of it. Because I've often seen where if you leave it too much to an individual and it's not looked at collectively, it gets tripped up. And the importance is just making sure that people are clear on who is accountable for what and when. Because when that's not clear, I think you're going to do something nobody knows, etc. So definitely build it at an individual level, but be sure that it makes sense almost, I want to say, at a sort of a collective greater level. And because also, remember, there are jobs that have clear regulatory and other accountabilities. And if you're not getting that right, you might not even operate. So that's why, for me, don't just leave it just at an individual. Think clearly around accountability.
Nice. The idea of trusting leaders with appointing people does not work because leaders appoint their minimes. Comment.
He looks at me, I look away.
Can I take the fifth?
Yeah.
No.
But that's the work that we need to do, right? We're laughing about it, but that is often the work that we need to do with leaders around challenging that mindset of don't employ somebody who's like you. Be deliberate about diversity and inclusion because it will benefit you. If you're both the same and thinking the same, what added value are you getting? So it's something leaders do, but it's something from a leadership perspective that we say, challenge yourself. Diversity is in your best interest. Get people who are different from you because that's actually going to help you better.
When I do teamwork and I use the MBTI, I'm also guilty of that. It's so interesting to see how the pattern is when you plot it on a flip chart. You find with Tabombekis, they will hire more Tabombekis, and they will write reports. They will be very intellectual. The Donald Trumps, they will hire another Donald Trump. So it's actually very interesting, and it's so unconscious. It's not even funny. It's so unconscious. It's not even funny. I don't know how we're going to resolve that.
Yes.
But yeah, it happens, and I agree with her that diversity is a strength.
Yes. So I guess when you have diverse views, even in the panel, that can help you.
Yes.
And allow the people in the panel to actually have real input.
Yes.
Can really help you. Okay, I'm having so much fun putting you guys under pressure. We're going to extend it another 5 minutes. I'm not going to look at the producers. I'm loving these short, quick ones. In this day and age, job descriptions are highly overrated and we must get rid of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Because
Tshepo just reviewed trend.
sorry, Tshepo.
Yeah.
It's not gonna
I'm gonna say yes because yes is a baseline. But think about it. I don't know. But I'm just thinking, when was the last time I actually looked at my job description? What plays out is that do the job, we talk about it with the boss, it evolves. Sometimes, yes, we go back for various reasons where we need to update it. So, yes, there is a place for it, but I do think sometimes too much value is placed in it. And I think in the world that we are in, don't be that person who says, but this is not in my job description.
I think I'm still a bit old-fashioned. I still believe I do a lot of work for government work. And rigid industries like medical, where people can die if things are not done properly. And there is a need for that. And how you see it is that have a bad employee, you will see how important the job description
That's actually true too.
You will see if you have to go to CCMA, how important the job description is. So it's all games and fun, and we don't review until you have somebody who doesn't take accountability. I think I also, some big organizations, some people work across different teams. So you might be an engineer, but you interact with supply chain, you interact with other, and job descriptions are good. There's this RASI element that I'm including, where you need to be clear that you're responsible for this, you're accountable for this, but you just need to be consulted, but you're not responsible for that. And you find a simple thing could be supply chain. You find an overreaching sometimes where people will say, no, but I want that service provider, but and they don't know where they need to stop. They need to have a scope. So I still believe that job descriptions are important. Otherwise, you will see flames.
Very good. All right. So in closing, therefore, we've spoken about org design. We've spoken about job design. I guess those are tools. But I think in the conversations that I'm hearing from you, it sounds to me like conversations with the people, involving the people that you're designing with, and the role of the leader is more important than actually which framework and models that you have. So maybe last comments to both of you. How do we then unleash employee potential? Is it about some of the things we've already said, or is there anything that you want to add as a parting shot in the conversation? Get deep, ne?
Deep. So maybe some other elements that I just want to add to it, that sometimes we don't spend enough time in this process that we're talking about, and maybe the one does link to leadership. And I think, Tshepo, you did mention it to an element as well. So change management is a big element that's important to think about when you undertake design perspectives, because within that goes with the whole element of enrolling the right stakeholders, having the conversations that are needed, checking the right governance that are also going to support that are part of the equation, spending time on thinking around operationalization of the things are all important elements to it. And then lastly, I think for me, just looking at some of the things that I've experienced is also you need to hold things a little bit lightly. And I find that we are afraid to do that. Because remember, sometimes we go through territory that nobody's been through before. So think about COVID, how it might have changed and impacted businesses. Who has been through a time like that before? Nobody. So yes, there might have been structures and roles and things that we needed to pivot and change. It's new territory. We use science, we look at different models, we try something. If it doesn't work, it's okay. Let's also embrace experimentation with some of these things. And then if we need to pivot and retweak, let's do it. But often we are then so hanging on because I designed it and now I don't want to hear the feedback, and you're so rigid about it. And that's also not helpful. So I think for me, it's also around with some of the things that you do your best, hold it lightly, let it play out, but have an attitude of experimentation so that you can tweak and pivot and, change if you need to be.
Sounds great.
And realize that these things, whether it's the structure, the tools, it's people who are in it and who are part of it. And so don't forget that element, that the biggest thing that's going to help make it the success is how the people who are in it have been involved, have been enrolled, have felt they have a voice and can see meaning and significance in it.
Power.
Yeah.
Tshepo?
I agree fully with I think it's never like it's not a special pill you take and then that's it, voila. But it's a set of aspects to be looked at and to be addressed. And the result of that is a truly fulfilling employee experience.
Sounds amazing. Thank you so much, guys. What a great conversation. I want to ask you, Tshepo, if people want to work with your company, Affinity, where do they contact you? Where do they book you? Or you have too much money? You don't want
He's speaking for himself. Don't worry.
I'm in Hatfield. Website is affinityconsulting.co.za.
Okay.
Also, my email address is Tsiu, Tshepotsiu @affinityconsulting.co.za. But I don't come cheap.
I like that.
I love it too. Bongi, how do people connect with you? I don't know whether it's LinkedIn or whatever you prefer.
Yes, so definitely you can contact me on LinkedIn. My name there is Bongi Dlamini, or you can also email me at bongiwehaz. So it's bongiwehaz@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for a fun conversation, but also really, really great nuggets. Really, really appreciate the time that you've taken to spend with us. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Remember, work doesn't have to suck. And together we can unlock the potential of employees and organizations alike. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes. And until next time, keep it real, keep it productive, and goodbye.
Wonder. So is that your tagline? Keep it
real. Keep it not productive.
Keep it productive.
Guys, thank you so much.
Was that an hour?
Yeah, it was more, ne?
An hour and 10 minutes.
Oh, okay,
Oh, wow.
sure.
It goes fast, ne?
10 minutes is going to cost you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.